train. Train. You should all train them on doors. Now you train how to do those stuff. You can train doing this combo.
Yes, but it's the right phone later after that. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Is the lighting okay for that camera? It's great. Is it too dark on the camera? I don't think so.
I'll be out here at all.
Okay.
Okay, so my computer says it's 9 o'clock, so I guess I should get started. Okay.
Most definitely.
Okay, good. All right, welcome to my panel, Creating Visual Novels. My name is Anton Strickland, but you also might know me from my online name, Kinjo Goldbar, from Goldbar Games. So to start off, I will advance the slide, and I will tell you about myself a little bit. So, as I said, my online name is Kinjo Goldbar, and I'm leader of the independent game group Goldbar Games. I've had experience making games since 2006, when I started out as a game maker. My favorite game genres tend to be mystery or puzzle, And my favorite game of all time is Super Mario 64. I'm a huge Mario fan. So that's my character. I've got a cosplay for him, wearing it right now. So things I'm notable for making are When the Sea Cats Cry, which is a series of Umineko fan games for anyone who's heard of Umineko. I've also made an original visual novel called The Misadventures of Detective Butler, and it's an ongoing episodic mystery story inspired by Umineko. So if you like Umineko, you'll probably like it. Which, by the way, I have CDs of the game up here that you can take on your way out if you would like. And I've got some other stuff up here too. So, that's it. I also work on non-visual novel games, such as Witch Doctor Kaneko, which is a puzzle platformer game I'm working on. So, that's about me. But I want to know first, how many people in here know what a visual novel is already? Okay, about half of you. Well, for the half that don't, I'm going to explain it. So, what are visual novels? It's actually really hard to find a definition for what they are. But going by Wikipedia, visual novels are an interactive fiction game featuring mostly static graphics, most often using anime-style art or occasionally live-action stills, and sometimes video footage. Now, that's kind of a complicated thing, so I tried to break it down a little bit. And I decided it was just text-heavy storytelling through a video game medium. And even then, it's not even that, because you can have RPGs that have a lot of text-heavy storytelling and it's a video game. So the line between what is and what is not a visual novel is kind of blurry at points. But either way, visual novels end up having four main components: programming, writing, graphics, and sound. So before I talk about those, I'm going to talk about some terminology you should probably know if you want to make a visual novel. First off, OELVN stands for Original English Language Visual Novel. More recently, the term is shortened to just EVN because it's a lot shorter and stands for English Visual Novel. Certain genres in the visual novel world are certain visual novels are known for being dating simulator kind of games. And so, over time, people have developed terminology to sort them. So, there are Bishoujo games and Otome games, which are where the boy pursues the girl and the girl pursues the boy, and you've got opposites, or you've got other kind of games, yaoi games, yuri games, where you've got boys pursuing boys and girls pursuing girls. And so, if you're into the dating sim market, you would be seeing those abbreviations a lot. Some visual novels have romance in them, some of them don't have any romance at all. It entirely depends. But those are some common things you'll see. Character routes are also really common, and they mostly pop up in those kinds of games, those romance games. That's because in a character route, well, first off, visual novels in general, as their main component of gameplay, tend to have decision-making choices in a story. So, whenever you make decisions, you're going to end up going down a character's route. And usually when it comes to a dating sim kind of game, that's what differentiates the game. So the object of a dating sim would be to end up with a certain character. And so you go down their character routes by making choices. And that is where the boy and girl elements come into play. Some visual novels actually don't have choices at all. Those are called kinetic novels. I don't know why the terminology is kinetic if it doesn't have any choices, but that's just how people termed it. So we're going to go with that. So you can have a visual novel that has no choices at all, or you can have one that has lots. You can have one that has romance. You can have one that has none. There's a lot of room for possibilities. So some examples of visual novels, for people who don't quite know what they are. This one is Clannad. It has an anime adaptation. Some people might have seen it. It's a romance game, bishoujo game. And you can see it has the character sprite standing in front of a background, and it's got a text box with text on the text box. So that's one example. You also see there's like a calendar thing at the top left to tell you what day it is. Some games have that, some don't. Now, Fate Stay Night is a really different kind of game from Planet. It's not romance in particular, and I actually haven't read it, but I know it's one of the really popular visual novels out there along with Planet. And this scene in particular is a fight scene. And you can see that the text is on top of the entire page. It's not actually a small box here. And there are no character sprites, there's no background. Instead, it's just one single background, which displays fighting. So what that's called is called a CG. And a CG is typically used in place of a background in sprites to describe a large or important scene, a largely important scene in your story that usually can't be described by sprites and backgrounds alone. So for a fight scene of this type, you would want an accurately drawn portrayal of the fight instead of just two static sprites next to each other. Umeneko no Naku Korone, which is my personal favorite visual novel, you can see it has two sprites, there's room for three, and it's got a background layer in the back there, and text is just all over the front of the screen. Now, you can tell that the art isn't exactly the best. It was drawn by the writer himself, but you can also see that the background, well, you could see the background, is actually a photographic picture if the sprites weren't in front of it. And that's a technique that people use sometimes to make backgrounds for visual novels, is just take a picture, filter it through Photoshop, and you have your background instead of taking lots of hours to draw it. Another popular visual novel is Phoenix Wright. A lot of people have probably heard of this one. It has more gameplay elements to it, and, well, pretty much that. You can see it has sprites and a text box, but overall, I just want to get the point that these are all very different kinds of games, and yet they're all visual novels. Danganronpa is another popular one. I think they had a panel for Danganronpa earlier, but that's also really gameplay-oriented. Now we get into English-made visual novels. All of them before were Japanese. So Katawa Shoujo, which is a Japanese title, is an English-made visual novel about crippled girls and how you date them. So it was a really popular visual novel because it was like a 5-year project by members online. They got together, made this visual novel over a 5-year time span, and they actually finished it, and it got really popular. So it's probably one you've heard of. Juniper's Knot is another example by Dizchan. They also ended up making a few other games, and they're well known in the community. I thought this game in particular has a really nice art style to it. Long Live the Queen is another game. You will see this game on Steam, which, by the way, visual novels are getting picked up more and more on Steam, which is pretty interesting to see. But this one is mostly gameplay-oriented, rather than being completely text-based. Detective Butler is my game. You can see what I've done here with the sprites. You've got cel-shaded sprites with a photographic background and a text box that is black with white text on it. So, there you go. Those are some examples of visual novels, and now I'm going to talk about planning. So, now that we know what visual novels are, we can start planning to make them. First off, what do you want to do? If you want to make a visual novel, is start small. You don't want to start big with your first one. It's really difficult. Detective Butler took me between 1 and 2 years, depending how you count it, but generally you want to keep it down to like a month or two for your first one. You want to make sure you make a lot of mistakes really quickly so that you can learn from them. So start small. You also want to play to your strengths so that the visual novel you end up making is actually really good. For example, I'm particularly good at coming up with mysteries and puzzles, and a different kind of genre would not exactly work for me if I tried to make it as well. But people enjoy reading the stuff that I write because it's something that I'm good at. If I tried a different thing, it wouldn't work as well. So make sure you do that, and also put in your personal style of what you want to do into your work, and it's going to help a lot. And you'll have to be prepared to work a lot, because it is a lot of work. And I'll cover all of the different aspects of the work soon enough, so you'll see how much work does go into it. But in terms of hours, it's going to take like For me, I just work in my spare time, which is whenever I'm not doing something else. So I spend hours and hours and hours into my kind of stuff, and I can only imagine how many more hours other people put into their work. But you always want to keep practicing to get better. Even if you don't think you're good enough right now, you can get better if you just keep trying at it. And the best way to do that is just start doing it, and you can get better and better and better with each time, which is why you want to start small. Can't emphasize that enough. Don't be afraid to ask for help either, because there are a lot of people willing to help you, and I'll get to that. And of course, remember to have fun, because if you're not having fun, why do it? So, should you work with a team? That is actually a question you should ask before how you get a team, because you might actually be better off with that one. If you can actually do all of the stuff yourself, if you can draw, write, program, and make music, then you're good to go. If you can't, then we run into some problems. You can see here that there's a little Venn diagram that has cheap, fast, and good in different categories. That is because it is really hard to find someone who is all three. Typically, if you're looking for someone who, for example, if you're a writer and you need art, if you're looking for artists that are fast and good are not going to be cheap. They're going to want you to pay a lot of money for what they do. So, on the other hand, if you want a cheaper artist, they might not be as fast and they might not be as good. You'll have to make certain cost decisions in order to form a team for a visual novel. But it can work if you do it on your own. For example, Umineko, the writer, is also the artist. He does get music from different places, and similarly, a lot of English developers get music from royalty-free websites instead of making it themselves. But overall, you can do pretty much whatever you want as long as you know what is your budget, what are you willing to sacrifice for your game to make it work, and how well can you get along with the people that you know. So, that said, let's say you can't do it on your own. You want someone to help you out. How can you do that? Well, first off, if you know anyone in real life, you should probably talk to them, see if they're interested. There's probably a lot of people in this room who want to work on visual novels, so you could ask somebody here. But if you don't want to do that, then where you go is the internet. And there's one website in particular that is really dedicated to visual novels, which is Lemmasoft. And that's basically the central place for where people go to make them and post them. I'll do a Q&A at the end.
I just want you to spell them.
Oh, okay. I will have, I should mention, I will have these slides on my website if anyone wants to look at them. And I will also have a spelling for that in a slide in just a few minutes. So, and also, we should save questions to the end because I have a lot to get through. And, yeah, so I'll try and go really fast, but I'm really interested in questions when we get to them. So, how and where to find teammates? Well, there's the internet. And on this website, you can find lots of people who are interested in making games. You can find completed games, works in progress, and you can find recruitment threads. So if you're looking for a team, you can, for example, go to the recruitment section and you can post your game and you can say, hey, I need an artist or I need a musician, and people will respond to you. You can also go to that section and take a look at the threads people have made saying, I'm an artist, I'm a musician, I want to work on a project. Does anyone have a project out for me to work on? And so those are two good ways to find teammates. Now, if you want to try a different way, you could go and find the artist in a different location. For example, DeviantArt. If you want to go to DeviantArt and find people there, that is actually a pretty good place because you're going to where the artists are. So you can go to Lemmasoft and take the approach of I'm making a visual novel, these are other people who want to make visual novels, let's go. Or you can go to an external website like DeviantArt or Newgrounds or wherever, even go to social media like Reddit or Twitter, find people who do stuff like this or their own personal websites and just say, hey, I've got a job for you, and see what they will react if they've ever heard of a visual novel or whatever, you can just reach out to them and contact them. But the key component is making sure you find good teammates that you can work with, because it's really going to change how your visual novel turns out. If you get a team that you're not exactly good with and is not dedicated. So make sure everyone on the team is really interested in working with you and that everything works out well. Because there are there have been some management problems with like people dropping out of projects and stuff. It's very common for people to just disappear. So make sure you have good communication skills, and they also do. Okay, so the first thing of a visual novel is writing. The first thing you want to think about before you write is, what is the best medium for your story? Should you actually be making a visual novel at all? And that's a question a lot of people don't even seem to think about. If their game would actually be better, say for example, as a comic or as a film. Maybe you're more artistically gifted and you can't seem to find teammates. Maybe you can just draw a webcomic of it. Or maybe if your story doesn't really depend on images that much, maybe you could just write a book about it. It depends on how you want to do things, but if the key is you want sound, images, user interaction, decision-making for your story, and that plays a huge role in it, then you should probably make a visual novel about it. You also want to start with a flexible outline once you know that you're ready to go. This is just writing advice in general, but you want to start with a flexible outline so that you can change it early on. You don't want to make changes later, because later changes really mess up things. If, for example, you've got, and this is speaking from my experiences, if you end up changing the story at the very end and you've commissioned a bunch of art assets showing scenes or showing characters that don't exist anymore in your story, you've wasted a lot of time and money. So you want to make sure that you know what you're doing right off the bat, and start, as much as I say begin flexible, you really want to end up with something solid at the end, so that you don't wander off too far. And that's a good reason to start small. If you start small, it's harder to mess that up. And don't be afraid to cut out content if you think it's bad. If there's a scene that I'm writing and I just think, man, this scene is really bad, I just don't even try to fix it. I just get rid of it entirely, because why spend time working on a scene that isn't good, and it's just going to make, if I'm reading the scene and it's boring to me, how could I expect other people to think that it's interesting? So just cut it out and make sure that you've got something that is small, concise, solid, and is entertaining. You also want to edit and revise your scripts often to make sure, spelling mistakes, catch all of those, stuff like that. Make sure that things are headed in the right direction, and so you don't have to do all of that at the very end. You also want to keep your team members updated on the latest version. You can do that with Google Drive or Dropbox. Those are all really helpful things, and also with Google Drive, you can post images and sounds and all kinds of files, basically, which is really good if you're working with people from the internet. So for visual novels in particular, there is an aspect to the writing, which is choices and branching. Books don't really have that unless you count those choose-your-own-adventure books, which are really similar to what visual novels are. But you've chosen a visual novel because you've decided that choices and branching are really important to you in your story. So how can you incorporate that into your writing? Well, it's about, writing is about the conflict between characters, whether it's internal, external conflict, or just, in most visual novels cases, it's talking between characters to each other. There's a conflict of, in a romance game, there's a conflict of how will the boy, pursue the girl, or, which one will he pursue, and so on and so forth. For a mystery, there's of course the conflict of how does a detective solve the crime. And other visual novels, you've got all kinds of conflicts, and in stories in general, you have conflict. So an important thing for the choices to focus on is the conflict of the choice, or rather, how the choice affects the conflict in your story. How does it address that? So if you're working on a mystery game, you might have a choice be, if you're solving the crime, right, then a choice that would affect the story is how you collect the evidence, how you present your case, Phoenix Wright, right? So another thing might also be if you're doing a dating kind of game, your choices would affect, oh, well, do the boy and the girl end up together? And that's, of course, based on your choices that you make. You know, do you go to the one place or do you go to the other place? Which girl do you meet? You know, so that's how the choices affect the different conflict in the story. You can also have short-term and long-term effects. Those are like, you know, main character is at school. You know, do they go to, it's lunchtime and they want to eat somewhere. Do they go to the classroom? Do they go to the cafeteria? Do they go to the rooftop? And they meet 3 different characters depending on wherever they go. Now, those could have like short-term effects, like, oh, okay, I just read a scene that would be different each time I pick a different place. Or it could be long-term, where it's like, you know, depending on how often you go to the same place, suddenly that character starts to like you more. Or a different kind of long-term effect could be if you're in a murder mystery game and it's like, oh, this character's about to die, you have the antidote to their, you know, poison. You can choose to, like, you know, cure them or not, and whether or not they're alive or dead, that's totally up to, you know, the player's choice. And that would make characters think of you differently. So a lot of the visual novel aspect is putting a lot of choice onto the player, and if you can incorporate that into your writing, then that's going to be a really interesting visual novel. And of course, what can the player gain from repeated playthroughs? Visual novels are interesting because you can play them multiple times. You can read the same story over and over. And that's an interesting thing, is that you can do the same thing, but then make different choices and see where that ends you up. And a lot of people will play visual novels as like a completionist sort of thing, where they have to go down all the character routes, they have to go down all of them, make all the choices. And that ends up, you know, they have to read a bunch of text over and over that they already read, but for them it's an interesting experience because it shows different sides of the same story, which can't normally be done in like a book or a movie where you can only play it once. Now, programming. I'll try not to spend much time programming because I understand it's a lot of, not exactly easy to get, but there are a lot of ways to help people learn programming for visual novels in particular. Without programming, you cannot have one. You can't have a visual novel because it's a video game. You need to know how to program, at least to some extent. And you should ideally use this to bring your story to life. Use it to make your novel stand out. Incorporate things with the graphics and the sounds to enhance the experience of your writing. So, you'll need to pick a game engine. RenPy is the most popular game engine. It's a Python-based scripting language. Most popular engine, Katawa Shoujo, Dysfunctional Systems made with it, among a lot of others. It has a very easy learning curve. It comes with most of the visual novel's features, such as saving, loading, skipping, being able to skip text, automatically reading text, and a log to read previous text in case you want to read previous text, so on and so forth. That's all incorporated already, and it's designed for people who are more so writers than programmers. It can export to pretty much any platform, and it has a really active user base, which I said before is Lemosoft forums. So I'll show you an example of what it looks like. So this is the code, and basically what you do is you go to RenPy's website, download RenPy, and then open this up with your text editor. And you can see at the top there's some comments at the top with the pound sign, and it's got a label start, so that's where the game starts. This is the tutorial script that comes with RenPy. And you've got scene to display the background, show to show a character, width is like a transition, so it has a dissolve effect, and then play music plays music. It's pretty straightforward. Window show, that shows the text window. The E stands for a character with the letter E in their name, and then they just have the text right there. So it's pretty straightforward. And at the bottom of it, you can kind of see some more Python stuff with while loops, if statements, so on and so forth. But I won't get into that stuff too much. Another game engine that's popular is OnScriptor, or Inscriptor in Japan. The O is actually for open source because it's an open source thing. So It's mostly used for older Japanese visual novels like Fate Stay Night, Umineko, Tsugihime, etc., stuff like that. And primarily Windows-based because it's Japan. And it can be modified to run on Macs, Linux, and stuff like that. It definitely runs on Android, but it's a lot harder to do that. And the thing is, it has a very small user base, but it does have good documentation. RenPy's documentation can be kind of difficult because they keep updating it a lot, and so the documentation gets out of date. But Unscripter never going to get updated, so you're good on that. So I'll show you the differences with the code here. It's more assembly-like, if you know assembly language programming, where you've got the label at the top, and this is code from my fan game, When the Sea Cats Dry. So at the top, you've got a label defined by the asterisks, and like the variables have like dollar signs and percentage signs, and so really not easy to explain assembly because it's closer to like computer language. But you can see there's text that is separated by little @ symbols, and the / changes the page. So I won't get into the technical stuff too much. You can learn the technical stuff on your own. But another thing I want to mention is Unity. It's professional software used in the game industry. So, and it's something that I've been moving towards instead of Unscripter. Honestly, I just completely skipped RenPy. So I don't have that much experience with it outside from a few things that I've done. But Unity is what I'm working with now, and it's designed for making any kind of game, not just visual novels. You will need to know C# or JavaScript and actual programming languages to actually get this to run. And you will actually have to program all of the visual novel elements yourself. It does not come with like any sort of visual novel package. You have to learn how to save and load things, and learn how to store a history of text data and stuff like that. Good news is it can export to pretty much anything, including websites, so you can have visual novels on your website, which is something that I'm going to be doing. And it has a huge community for support because it's Unity, it's a big thing in the industry. And the pro version, there is a pro version of it. It costs $1,500, but you don't need to buy it to make your game. It's just for special lighting effects and camera effects and so forth. You can make a game with the free version of Unity. And I should also mention RenPy and Unscripter are all free as well. So this is what Unity looks like. This is from a project I was working on where I made a scene from Umineko, but in 3D. So this is a pretty memorable scene from the first game. And you can see a bunch of different windows. There's the scene window, the camera window. There's the objects and the resources in your folder. And you've got a highlighted object, and you can see in the inspector all of the different properties that it has. So these are a lot of different things, and they're all pretty complicated, but if you take the time to learn them and look at some Unity tutorials on YouTube or something, then you can learn it pretty easily. But yeah, so it's more complicated than most other visual novel making programs. This in particular is a Unity package called Fungus, which is designed for visual novels. So it's designed to make things a little bit easier. You've still got the scene view where you can see the background and the character, and you can see like a flow chart of how the choices are going to pan out, and you can see the descriptions and stuff. It's a lot more visual oriented, but so that's available if you want. If you don't want to make your own thing from scratch, you can do that too. There are other game engines. There's quite a lot of them, but I can't talk about all of them. So there's Visual Novelty, which is like a drag and drop interface. It's really outdated, and I don't know if there's much support for it anymore. There's also Tyranno Builder, which is a new thing that came out on Steam recently. I have not tried it yet, but apparently it's a drag and drop interface, and it's pretty good. Fast Novel and Cloud Novel are more web-based. I haven't really messed with those, but they exist. Twine is another thing that is just for story-based stuff in general, not necessarily visual. Kirikiri is a Japanese game engine that's like a better version of Unscripter. All the documentation's in Japanese though, so good luck trying to read that. GameMaker is a really good choice if you're just starting out with games in general, if you want to learn how to make any kind of game. So you'd have to do all the visual novel elements yourself, but that's a choice. And RPG Maker, same way. mostly designed for RPGs, but anybody who has played To the Moon or Bird Story would know that it's also good at telling visual novels. So we can get to drawing now. If you're going to draw art, you're going to need a drawing tablet and a pen. You can and probably might want to sketch out your drawings on paper first. That's what I do. And then you can scan them in digitally and get that working. But as for the tools, you'll want to work with Paint Tool Sai and Adobe Photoshop. Those are the two big ones that artists use. If you don't want to draw at all, you can also use public domain sprites and pictures because people do make those. So you can use them if they're in the public domain. So as for the actual process, and I'm not really an artist myself, but I try. So this is not my art either. This is art for my game that's really old and outdated, but either way. So you can see on the left is the line art. You would take your sketch version, put it into Photoshop or Paint Tool Sai, and then take a layer and just outline it with black or something. And then the next step after the line art is coloring. And then the next step after coloring is shading. And so you end up with something on the right. And that sounds like, oh man, it's so easy, only 4 steps, but it's pretty complicated if you don't know how to do it. So I'll leave that to an art tutorial. But as for actual visual novel things to consider, your sprites should have different facial expressions. They should express how the character is feeling at the time when they're talking. Characters can have different poses, different outfits. The more variety you want to add, the harder it is going to be to make them because you're investing a lot of time into this kind of thing. If I was to give one character, 5 different outfits and 10 different poses, that would take a long time because that's a lot of things to draw. So you might want to consider how many different varieties of characters you're going to have. And another thing you should consider is how much of them are you going to draw. You can see here that the sprite is only waist up. A lot of games just have waist up sprites. I think that's kind of a waste because there's the other half of the body, and if you draw a full sprite, you can do some interesting things and have characters standing in different places and stuff like that. If you don't draw the second half, you kind of lose some information there, and you can't do some more interesting programming things. Backgrounds, there are a few different ways to make those. You can draw them just like the art for the sprites. You can also take pictures and filter them through Photoshop like this one. This is also from my game. And you can also use like a 3D model creator like SketchUp or something, or Blender or whatever, and make your scene in 3D and then take a picture of it, or just use an entire 3D model as your scene if you're working with a 3D game. Not much else to say there other than backgrounds should depict the scene that you're in, and that's about all there is to it. You can do some interesting things with backgrounds if you think outside the box with them, though. Within CGs, they should depict, like, as I was saying earlier, either important things or things that you want to draw attention to. So this would be an important thing, or also things that can't be represented well with just sprites and backgrounds. So this, for example, is an important plot detail. These 2 characters become important to the mystery, and so I focus on them in a CG. Now there is the downside of, I've had CGs be commissioned before that weren't exactly that useful in the end because I changed the story too much. So you want to make sure you know what CGs you should draw, if any. You don't need a CG in your story. You can just have a game without them. Graphical user interface is also important. That's going to be your text box and related things like menus, options, stuff like that. This is a screenshot from another studio's game, which is called The Pirate Mermaid. It's about a mermaid who is a pirate. Or the other way around, it's a pirate who becomes a mermaid. And so you can see here that the user interface is designed really nicely. It has the old style paper text box because it's like a pirate. And you've got the picture of her on the right. And the little click to continue icon is a coin that spins around. And the name box is another thing of parchment with the pirate wheel. And it actually spins if you play the game. They programmed it so that it spins around and stuff. And it's really cool. So you can see how that incorporates things from the theme of the game into the game itself. And so that's what you should aim for if you're making a graphical user interface. Now, music and sound resources. There's a lot of audio editing tools and creation tools. Audacity, FL Studio, GarageBand, Mixcraft, Reason, and what I used for my game was Magic's Music Maker. You can do whatever you want with your resources once you have them. You can also go for royalty-free stuff. Basically, I just go for royalty-free stuff for the sound effects because it's really easy and simple, and you can do that. Now, I don't know much about composing music myself, so I'll leave that to a tutorial. But as far as things you should think about when incorporating them into your game, decide on a style that fits the mood of the scene. That's really important. A lot of people forget about that kind of stuff. A lot of people don't even realize that you don't need music in a scene. You can just have atmospheric sound effects, like if it's on the beach, have the waves crashing in the background, or if it's a really intense scene, have some wind blowing. Umineko does that kind of stuff a lot, and it really sets the tone for a lot of interesting scenes. And a lot of scenes in Umineko have some really memorable soundtracks in them. So one thing that you want to do is make sure that the sound effects and the music is coordinated well, and that it really leaves a lasting impression, so that whenever you play the song, it's like, oh yeah, it's from that scene. You want to play sound effects when the script calls for it, like if the door opens, play the sound of a door opening. If a door closes, play the sound of a door closing. If something happens and there should be a sound that the player hears, play a sound. Voice acting is optional. Some games do it, not all of them do. You don't need it. It usually costs a lot of money if you want to hire people, but if you can do it and it's good, it can add to your game for sure. And I don't have any personal experience with voice acting, so. Opening videos and animations, these are kind of cool if you can do them, because it looks really professional if you can get a movie for your game. Some visual novels have movies at the start, that play at the start. Some don't. It really depends. But most English ones don't, because it takes a lot of effort and skill and learning. Adobe After Effects, that's what you're probably going to want to use. I would also use Sony Vegas to do the editing and splice things together. That's what I did to make the movie for my game. The video is going to set a tone for your game, and it will leave a first impression on them. And if it's really done well, you can get downloads just from the movie alone, which is, again, personal experience. People watch the movie and they're like, hey, this looks like a cool game, I'll download it. So it's a really good marketing strategy too, if you make a movie or a trailer of some sort. Okay, so once you've got your game, you've got all the 4 components, and maybe you've made an opening movie. Now you shouldn't wait until the last minute to test your game, but I'm talking about it last. You want to test your game all the way through, and send your game to a variety of people to play it. You want to make sure that it is well tested. There are not very many proofreading mistakes, no spelling mistakes. You want to make sure that the game does not crash, because surprisingly, people upload games that crash, and it's really annoying. So people need to make sure that their game actually works before they publish it somewhere. Test as many operating systems as you can, know which ones it works on and know which ones it doesn't, and what to do if someone is like, hey, this game doesn't run on my machine, what do I do? So figure that stuff out beforehand. Fix pretty much everything, basically. And most importantly, play it all one last time before you upload it. Because there are a lot of things that's like, I read all these visual novels and stuff, and it's like, man, didn't that guy test it before he uploaded it? Because there are some, the game crashes when I run it, so I'm not exactly sure if he even tested it at all. So make sure you do that, or else it will be kind of embarrassing later on. But that's pretty much it. So I will take questions now. That's my presentation. So if anybody has any questions, I will take them. And thank you all for coming, of course. And as a reminder, you can take my games on your way out if you are interested in that. But questions? Okay.
How long have you been doing this?
Visual novels in particular, I've been working on since 2011 or 2010, so about 5 years at this point. So, and my game took me 2 years to make, and yeah, pretty much it. Yes.
What got you interested in creating games?
Can you speak up?
What got you interested in creating games?
Oh, I've always been interested since I was little. Playing video games in particular, like Mario. I like how it just gives off a feeling of, man, I like how that was done. I want to do it too. I really like getting reactions from people and being like, oh, seeing how people deal with this kind of stuff. It's really interesting to me. And it's just really cool to give an experience to somebody that is kind of personal for me, because video games are kind of an art. And it's kind of like a personal experience. And my own ideas going to someone else. And especially from a puzzle mystery point of view, I like to have people solve things, and I enjoy that a lot. Lots of Nintendo games inspired me. So, any other questions? Any other comments? Interesting things to talk about? We've got about 10 minutes or so.
Who's your favorite Lumina character?
Well, okay, my namesake, Kinjo, that comes from Kenzo and Anjo. I love how their dynamic is. Kenzo is a really cool character. He does a lot of crazy things, and I really like his character. Yeah, so I guess Kenzo. Questions? Any other questions? I did kind of speak kind of fast on a few of these things. I will go back in case you're interested in that one website. Lemisoft. It's had a lot of interesting experiences there. Lots of cool games to play. Yes, questions?
How do you decide which, how many characters you want to have branching routes, or if you just like that aspect of it?
Okay, that's a really important aspect, because lots of people who start out, they're like, okay, this game's gonna have like 10 different characters, and we're gonna romance all of them, and it's gonna have 50 billion routes and lots of choices. And that's probably a bad idea. As for coming up with that, I haven't really done that yet, because I don't really work on branching games, but you want to start small and something that you can work with. I would recommend starting like 2 or 3 at most, and seeing how that works with you, and see if you can handle more. It's just that a lot of people end up going crazy with it, thinking, oh, I'm making, the next Katawa Shoujo, but, that took 5 years to make, and a lot of people dropped out. So it's not exactly rainbows and sunshine. It takes a tremendous amount of work to make even a game with one route in it. Any other stuff? Yes.
About how much have you invested in your game?
And how much have I invested?
Yeah.
Like
Not exactly.
monetarily?
Yeah.
I don't think I should say that, but it depends on the artist you want to do. Like, it depends on, it entirely depends. It's completely subjective, really. I wouldn't recommend spending too much. Don't go crazy with it. Visual novels are not really profitable. They're Kickstarter, they're visual novels who do Kickstarters, right? And they don't exactly, not all of them work. A lot of ones get funded, but it's really difficult to see one that is finished. Honey Pop coming out on top, those are some games that got finished. Dysfunctional Systems was really dysfunctional, and their Kickstarter, even though it was funded, the game didn't get finished, so I'm not quite sure what to think of Kickstarters. If you don't have the money, I would recommend just doing the best that you can with your budget, but try not to go invest too much, because if you do that, and I've definitely invested a lot of money and time. You don't want to spend more than you have to, and that's a really important thing. That's why you should start small. Don't go out spending, if you want to make a game with, 20 romanceable characters, that's going to cost you a lot of money if you want it from a good artist. So start small and find people who are within your budget, because that's going to save you a lot of stuff later on. And if you become friends with people who are good at this kind of thing, you can probably get some sprites for free. Some people like to do this just in their free time, and so you can you can get people to do stuff for you. You build up a reputation for yourself. The other question, yes.
Was your switch to obviously you haven't really seen much of your work. Is your work on gameplay based like PHP, writing down your Wampa?
Kind of. Well, my game that I have here is mostly a straightforward kinetic novel experience. So there are really no choices other than like interrogating characters. At the very end, because I thought I would keep it simple, you know, I'm not going to make a game with a bunch of choices just to see, you know, I want to see through to the end. I can do this without making, I can write a novel, right? So, but it's an episodic series, so in future episodes, I've got it planned out, and I'm working on this for a summer release. If you stay tuned on my website, I will have more episodes uploaded, and they're going to have a lot of gameplay elements to them. They're going to have investigation segments where you can click on things, investigate the crime scene, move around, and put things together and solve it on your own. And that is an advantage I found in Unity. You can actually do stuff like that. Doing that in OnScripter would be a lot more of a pain, and that's why I really didn't want to do stuff like that. So if you want more gameplay-oriented stuff, you're going to have to dig deeper into the programming. If you just want writing stuff, you can probably stick with a lighter visual novel engine. So.
What was that add-on from Unity again?
Oh, that is this. It's
I know what Unity is. I just want to know what that add-on was.
yeah. It's Fungus. So like, basically, you would import it into your game, and it would come up with a bunch of preset things like this. So it would make your life a lot easier if you use that, because it's got like the flowchart thing and all that.
Is it spelled F-U-N-G-U-S?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So, any other things, or in the back?
Is the programming you picked up on?
For which game engine do you think? Any? It depends. I mean, I'm a programmer myself. I go to school to study it, so I mean, for me, it comes pretty naturally. But I learned programming through GameMaker. That was a really nice introduction to it. It takes some time to get used to. It's like learning a foreign language. So if you've ever tried to learn a foreign language before, you can compare your experience to that, see how that works out. If you're good at logic and stuff like that, you don't need to be good at math at all. You just need to be good at like logic and combining sentences together, stuff like that. So, I guess there are no more questions. I guess we're done. So, thanks. So I do have copies of the game up here if you would like them. Free stuff on the table. Everybody like free stuff. Thank you for coming.
Free stuff on the table.
Oh, snap.
Free stuff.
Excuse me. Not individual books. It just kind of happens. out more about it. Yes, I am.
Because some training
Yes, yeah, I'm so excited.
Yeah, I was curious if you
I'm
were
so
going.
hyped.
No, but
Oh, okay. It looks really similar.
yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, my most interpretation of visual novels is probably like a too short. Fighting fantasy. Yeah, that's usually Final Fantasy. I mean, not no, bad fighting fantasy.
Oh, fighting.
It's actually you use dice, you read a book, and then you make choices. Something and it asks you to roll a dice sometimes.
I've never heard this on
It's actually a book.
okay. Yeah. I haven't read any books. I mean, I read books.
Yeah, but it's not Final Fantasy. It's fighting.
Fighting fantasy. I'll take that. You could team up with a programmer and be like, hey, I don't know much about coding side of things, but I want to improve writing and drawing. People would be interested in that for sure. People are always like artists. I don't know what kind of stuff you do. Yeah, people are so there's a process. You gonna tell me that? Yeah, I knew someone was gonna ask.
I want to know.
I was like, wow.
I want to know. And I know it was a lot.
You know, I never thought about it, but people want to like practice in front of us.
I practice a few times. It's just I'm a little rusty because I haven't practiced like this.
I just never thought about it before. I always forget.
The thing is, like, no matter how many times you practice it, it's gonna be good.
No, it's always pretty good. Second time you really got it.
Yeah, because I got into it. It's just starting out. Don't know
This
quite
is
how to
hard for
start
me
it.
though. I like the little person. Yeah. Choose in there. One is next to people there. You said that. I could go over and say hi.
I did it too, so that's all good.
I'm like, sure, I'll go outside and play, and I'm playing, like, getting inspired around, like, Game Boy, I'm on the playground. My friend's like,
And she's like, oh, there's a thing going on. And then she's playing the car. And she asked me,
oh, we have an hour. There's an hour to go online
I
and
guess one last thing is that here's basically the example.
Oh, okay.
Where are you going? Yeah. We can wait outside.
Figure out. What's up? That's they're not.
Yeah.
Just get educated. Don't forget it.
all right, we'll get back in my head. Yeah.
Test later. 16 years from now, I plan on calling you.
What was
I say
Can you repeat all of
I
it?
say later, I mean like really.
Not necessarily. You don't have to choose a button. So some of these instances, the dice choose for you with modifiers like that.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. And I've read a lot of
Not everybody.
Shakespeare adventures. Yeah. But yeah, I guess. So fighting fantasy.
Yeah, fighting fantasy.
You could totally make a game out of that. You know,
Maybe with just simple level.
yeah, you could like, you know, program a dice roll into it. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Usually these things, I don't think this thing was very long. It's like 33 pages.
Oh yeah. Thanks for coming.
You too.
Where's the yellow battery? No. Well, you can, but they would be scanned. Okay, I'll see you later.